Lots of times you've heard me talk about chisel hammers, different types, different sizes, and I really like these, but you can't really substitute these for these every time. These are more traditional mallets, and I really have enjoyed using them for a long time. I've used them ever since I was a boy, and I've never seen any craftsman using a hammer on a chisel, and yet today, because of the manufacturers like Record Irwin or Irwin Marples or whatever all those conglomerates are called these days, where they combine a steel button on the end that transfers through to the chisel. Most carpenters are using chisels and hammers, and it just seems incorrect even today for me, because I like the use of a mallet, but mallets somehow transfer weight. You get the center of percussion, you adjust them, you can work with them. They're very good when you have a small chisel handle, you're working on close work or whatever. They just somehow deliver the blow right where you need it without thinking. See how small this surface is? Striking with this, getting a dead center is not always the best. So I think everybody should have a wooden mallet of some kind. So we're going to take a look at my favorite mallet. This is one that I made from a wood that grows in Texas, mostly in Texas, and it's called cedar elm. And I'm not sure why it's got the cedar in there, but it's an elm, and it's a specific elm, and the wood on it is like 50 times that. That may be an exaggeration, but it's so much denser than regular elm, so much denser than oak. And one of the things you don't want in any mallet is for the wood surface in the dimple here is to surface fracture in there and become mushy. You want this thing to deliver the blow. And so this one has been around. I've had this one for probably 15 years. There are other woods that are good. There's a wood called Osage Orange or Bodark. Has several different names. That's really a very good wood. Oak works fine. Not my favorite, tends to mush a little bit, but I like to own a good oak mallet. So let me look. I've got some oak here, and the reason I chose the oak is because it's so readily available. If you were living in Kingston upon Hull, you won't find Bodark growing in Kingston upon Hull or anywhere in the British Isles. You will find it in different regions of the United States. It's a wonderful wood, and I really like it, but we're not going to get it. So I'm using wood that you can get hold of. The thickness can be difficult. I don't like laminated mallets. They don't seem to hold. Nothing laminated seems to hold for 50 years or more. You know, almost everything that's laminated seems to come unglued at some point. So I've got a couple of pieces of oak. Here's one that's already been smoothed and planed and prepared for a mallet. In fact, I've already made one mallet from this. You can see here, this piece came from that one. So what I did here is I hand cut this with a bow saw and then split off the section that I wanted, and that's a good way of doing it. Here I've picked a piece of oak. This is very typical. Lots of craftsmen used to pick their mallet heads from knotty area of the trunk of the tree. So there's a piece here that's got a knot here and a knot here. It's the same knot. This is obviously the outside of the tree because it's smaller here, so this is the inside. There are my growth rings. That's how I can confirm that. So this, will it go any further? No, it probably won't. And what you could do with this is mix 2-ton epoxy, pour this into the cracks and the fissures there, and then just leave it to set for 24 hours and then go back in and work it just like you can the whole surface of the wood. The reason craftsmen chose this knotted area is because much of the energy of the tree when it's developing this massive branch goes to this area, and it has this hardness and solidity that you don't get in other areas of the wood that's growing around it. So you get this configuration here that makes it very difficult. This would be very hard to split. So what I'm going to do, I can get 4 mallet heads out of this. The mallet heads are going to be 6 inches long, 4 inches from across here, 4 inches across, and then 3 inches thick. This could vary according to the wood. Oak's not a very dense wood. It's fairly open pored, but it's a good wood. It's going to be fine for a mallet. So this is my oak. First off, I'm going to cut this down the length at 4 inches. So this is 8 inches wide, I think. Right on 8 inches. So I'm going to go down the middle here. Now, because this knot's here and this grain is swirling around here, it's also doing something in this area of the wood. So if I were to try to split this, it would probably take me into this area and I wouldn't be able to get a mallet head from it. So I could saw down it, and I don't know if you've tried cutting a long 3-inch oak, even with a good saw, it can be quite an effort. You can do it, and there's nothing wrong with you wanting to pursue that, but I'm going to cut this on the bandsaw, and then I'm going to also cut this across here on the bandsaw, and then this one here, I think what I'll do is I'll do this a little differently. I'll go across here first with the bandsaw, then I'll go down here and I'll get my 2 guaranteed mallet heads, and then on this one I'll split this in 2 using a maul and a chisel hammer and an axe to get me down this section here. Okay, so safety first. Bandsaws always have some kind of inherent danger. One of them is dust. You really don't want to be breathing the wood dust. You don't want to take it. And it's very, very fine. I've got an extractor on the back that pulls the dust away from me and the chips and shavings and everything. But there are finings in the atmosphere that you really don't want to be breathing because they're the ones that cause the greatest damage. So I've got my dust mask, eye protection, and I'm going to go down on here, find the middle this way. I've got 13, so I'm going to go 6.5. But what I'm going to do, I've set this to the correct angle, which I'll give you later. So I'm going to go here and out here, and that's going to give me 2 angles. And I'll just go in here and transfer on the bandsaw. They won't be quite crisp on the corner, but I'll make my turn in here. Let's take a look at this now. Just my height, ready to go. I've got 2 here. I don't know what would have happened in here. You can see one of the nice things about working wood this way is you get this nice even surface. You can see medullary rays on both of these pieces, I think, here, going across. And that's because we cut square across the grain, across the circular annual rings or growth rings in the wood, and that gives you that figuring. Not going to be much good to us on this mallet head, but still pretty. So let's take a look at the splitting for this next one here. I'm going to use an axe. This one here. Probably not a good idea to just axe blow this, because you could be 1/4 of an inch off in one direction or the other. And I've actually got a fissure in here. I don't know if you can see this. There's a slight fissure there, which could be to my advantage. So I'm going to actually go on that fissure there. Take my, go over the leg of my vise here. Let's see what happens. Worked pretty good. One's going to be bigger than the other. It's just slightly, it's not very much. So again, you get to know the nature of the wood, so different than a machine. The machine gave me this pristine surface. Now I understand the nature of the grain. I can see the type of grain I've got, kind of coarse. So I could take off some of this excess here. Get me in the ballpark. So there's my axe blank already started. Got one of the angles. I'd get this fairly smooth out here. I've got to have one straight edge that I can use my square against. This is pretty straight here. So let's take a look now. Put this one aside. I can still get a good mallet out of here. It's not too far off the right size. Actually, that's perfect, really. So that's another mallet head I've got. Okay. What I'm going to do is just square up this so I can register my square against it. And I go to just my Stanley smoothing plane. There I'm going against the grain. You can hear it, you can feel it. Like this. Now I'm getting a much smoother cut. Medullary razor glistening and smiling back at me. Silky smooth. How square I am, I don't know yet. Pretty long way off here. So, looking at the grain, can you see these ray flecks coming here, this direction here? All right, does that tell me much? I'm not sure really. Ray flecks can be very deceptive. The split grain here tells me a very different story because this is coming here. So technically I feel like I need to play in this direction. It can be different from one side to the other. But what I'll do is I'll follow the ray flex so we can see. I think that's the wrong direction. Let's take a look. I could be wrong. It's still not obvious. Yeah, this is definitely against the grain, for sure. But I don't need to spend a lot of time on truing up this face because I'm going to be shaping it. If you look at the sides of this mallet here, we've got round here, we've got round on this face. The only one that stays square is this one. And then we've got some shaping on here that gives the impression that this is shaped, but it's not actually shaped. So I'm going against the grain here. So I was probably right to choose the other direction, but I could be going against the grain here, because remember that knot was in there, and that knot is giving you this shifting grain. This does feel so much smoother though. And all I want is enough on this face Can you see here, I'm getting a nice continuous shaving here with no surface fracture here. So I'm happier that I'm going with the grain, and I definitely feel a smoothness on this side here, which this is what I was going off. This split grain was telling me a more accurate story. So I'm close, but not there yet. So we'll take a little bit more off that inside. You could back your iron off if you don't have the physical strength. Just takes a little bit longer. So I want a straight face just to register my square against. I don't have to do the other side, and I don't have to do the outer edge. Good. I'm square for that. I've got this beautiful smooth surface. Can you see these rays in here? They're not medullary rays. It's almost like a curly ray that's in there. That means that is going to be more compacted grain, and that's because it was close to the knotted area. So now I'm going to work on my handle, because I get the tapered mortise hole from the shape of the handle. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. So we'll take this and we'll make the handle from this, and let me show you how I do that. I've got my mallet head kind of roughed out, face mark, face edge, just to show me which to register. I'm not going to register against these two faces, and neither am I going to refine them any more than I have done at this stage, because I don't need to. It's a waste of my energy. What I do need to do is cut the taper of this mallet head. You can see this pops out, and it's very, very much a great thing to have this separated, because it's so big. When you put it in the toolbox, the tool chest, you can store these separately or alongside one another, and they take up a lot less room in your toolbox. So that's why we do that. This part is protruding exactly the right amount. We don't want it to protrude any more than that. A lot of mallets show, especially when you buy them as a store-bought mallet, they're usually protruding about 1 inch. That's about the worst thing. When you're inside a cabinet on your knees and you're chiseling a mortise recess, you're holding your chisel here, this catches the top of the cabinet and chews out the corner or something like that. It's unnecessary. But when you first make your mallet, you do want it to protrude about 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, because very often the shaft will shrink. The handle itself will compress in the mortise hole as you drive this in. Things like that happen. This end, the ends of the mortise holes can consolidate themselves. So there are things like that. So you want it at first, leave it for about 2 or 3 weeks, a month or something like that, protruding. And then after you've got it really settled, you could go in and trim it down to a shorter protrusion. So here I've got a piece of, this is just over actually, this is 7/8 stock, but I'm going to actually plane this down to about 3/4. But first of all, I want to lay out the pattern from this, which is 1 3/4 at this end here, and then 14 inches long. This isn't necessary. You actually don't use the mallet down here. You use it more up here, close to. But the extra on the handle gives it a certain balance and a point of equilibrium somewhere here in the hand that gives you a balanced way of working with the mallet. So 14 inches is a pretty standard length, and I haven't found anything that improves on that. So then I go down here, and this end is 1 1/4. So that gives us the exact taper we want. So we're 1 3/4 here, 1 1/4 down here, and then unite those two with a straight edge. That'll work. There's my line. There, like that. And then you're going to rip that down. You could rip it with the bandsaw, you could rip it by hand. I probably would rip that by hand. I like the extra exercise I get from working with hand tools. It certainly makes me less lazy. And I'm going to leave the line in as I cut this, my trusty distant here. I'm going to cut away from the line, about maybe a 16th. Too much leverage there against me. This is a rip saw. Now I've gone in, it's kind of hard on it to be so perpendicular to the face. Now I've gone in a little bit, I can drop my hand here and I'll get a smoother cut, smoother cut down here. Another way you might want to go is this way in the vise. This will work well too. You just have to be prepared to move along. So here, this gives you a much smoother cut because of the lower angle of the hand down here. I usually keep going until it binds in the cut. Or I hit the bars inside. No, not really. So it's starting to bind in the cut. Just move it along. Yeah, be careful of the bars in your vise. And that's that. So I go to a crosscut saw now. I usually use a dovetail saw, something like that, small tenon saw. This is a 14-inch, not exactly small. So I'm going dead to length here. Somebody asked me why the vise was away. I can put this in the vise like this, and I don't have to lose my hand when it grips here because I can keep holding it. And the other thing is I can come on this side here and I can hold the piece before it falls on the floor. Several reasons. All right, so there's my tapered piece. I want to check this edge for square first here. And I'm dead square, which I knew because I'd already planed that straight edge. So now I'm going to make sure this edge is straight and square, because you don't want any gaps inside this tapered mortise hole. I've got a little, I can see my line. Can you see my line down the whole length there? Okay, just check it for square. Slightly out of square, in fact I'm quite a way out of square. It's because I was using a 4.5 instead of a 4. No, not really. Just love my 4. So, correcting that. Still kept my line on that side. And I am square. So I'm going to leave that line just where it is. What I do now is I'm going to take an exact center line on this. So I'm just a hair over 1 3/4. So I'm going to go just a hair over 7/8. And the same on this end, 1 1/4. So I'm going just over 5/8 because I'm just over that size. That's given me a center line that I'm going to use down the center of my stock. Sharper pencil. So I go down here. like this. Okay, can you see that? So I'm dead center on there. Then I'm going to go on here. Now I still have to cut this angle on here, and I'm going to mark that on. Am I here? On here. This angle is 7 degrees. So my angle marked on there, and I'll just cut this off in a minute with a bow saw. I could do that right now, couldn't I? Let me do that for you, and then you can see. If you can see that or not, really. Let me put it that way. You could use a tenon saw, it would be fine. I think a tenon saw would cut this most of the way through. No, half the way through. So you could just use your tenon saw like this. Saw through from both sides. I'd like the continuous cut that I get from using the bow saw. Here's a bow saw that I made, and we're going to do a video on this soon, hopefully. So you could use a bow saw like this, which I find very effective for this type of work. Before you go too far through, it's probably a good idea to turn this way and then follow your cut through from this side like this. And we're going to be planing the end of this, so don't worry if it's not perfectly true. We'll be planing soon anyway, so that one. And then to this side, we do the same. Like this. The bow saw really it's doing exactly the same as a bandsaw would do. One of the nice things is it needs no power except your energy, and it works so nicely really, especially if you want to work with hand tools. A little bit of a break out as I united here the two cuts. So now I can go with my smoothing plane like this and clean up this face. You can hear that harmonic. That's coming from friction between the surface of the wood and the plane, and also the end fibers of those standing grain ends. So I go with my plane, but listen to the difference now. Okay, again, one more. You don't need a block plane for end grain. This, number 4, is perfect. That Leonard Bailey, he knew his onions when it came to bench planes. That's my end grain planed on one end. Same on this end here. Actually, my cut was better from my bow saw than it was from the bandsaw. But that's because I had a pretty aggressive bandsaw blade in, which I use a lot because it cuts so efficiently. This is the end where the knot was, just below it, and I can feel it on that surface. So there, we're pretty close. Then you can see I'm slightly out of, well, I'm quite a way out of parallel here. So if I take my finger guide here, you can see I'm quite a chunk out of way. What we're going to do is we're going to be coming in here, something like this when we're done. But I may want to chisel off some of this, or I may want to axe off. I'll show you both methods. Oops. Bye-bye. Okay. Here, I could just axe down. When I was a boy, the axe was in common use. I used it all the time. My mentors of my apprenticeship used it all the time. But you could, if you don't have an axe, a good sharp axe, I'll show you how I might do it. I might take this with a wide chisel, sharp, and I might go in here, go across with the corner of your chisel. Watch this. This is a technique, this. You'll love it. You go across here, and you use a quarter of the chisel width, and you chisel across this like this. Watch this now. See, it's so easy. You won't find this in a book. How do you put this in a book? You won't find it in a book. So we're giving it you here on these videos. See here? Just getting all the undulation from the splitting from earlier. And I'm ready. If I wanted to plane this, I could start the planing procedure here. Now then, watch this. See, I've got a hollow in here like this. Instead of going with the grain, go across it. Just take off that one high spot right in the middle. Great experiments. Look at this. It's going down quite rapidly. Number 4 bench plane is all you need. And I've got my surface ready to go. Smooth, parallel. This outside face I didn't touch yet. It may not be parallel. Let's take a look. See here? Yeah. 16th, maybe 64th. That's a parallel.